Welcome back to the channel, my friends. Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and today we're taking a look at the new Metawatch. This video is sponsored by CMO Games. More on that later. Warhammer 40,000 Metawatch, the World Championships of Warhammer. Some of the best Warhammer players in the world descended on Atlanta, Georgia last weekend for the biggest Warhammer tournament in history. More than 40 nations were represented at the World Championships of Warhammer, and the Warhammer Design Studio were watching the results like a two-headed cyber eagle. This week, Warhammer 40,000 lead Stu joins Warhammer TV's Nick to discuss the results and their implications for the grim darkness of the far future. So there is a video right here. It's about 25 minutes. I went ahead and watched that. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the article and kind of sum up the findings. Two big names entered the finals for Warhammer 40,000, but only one could leave victorious. Manny Chima ultimately took the gold with a Chaos Space Marine list, beating John Lennon's Ultramarines in a tense championship match. John went for tactical missions from the chapter-approved deck to secure more points, making use of durable deep strike inceptors and infiltrating scouts to achieve the shifting secondary missions. So if you're not familiar with these two players, they are very well known in the hobby, in the gaming community. Manny obviously representing England, and John representing the United States. And they did play a best 2 out of 3 championship to see who would win. Manny took fixed objectives, and John took tactical mission objectives, which means Manny's did not change, but gave him a little less points, as where John's were random, but he received max points for them. And a lot of that is really just how you design your army. If you're going for fixed objectives, your army is probably a little less diverse, able to achieve the shifting tactical objectives. But as we'll see in the list building stage and what they brought, if properly designed, the tactical objectives can be very good as well. So let's take a look at John's list first. All right, so John with second place in the World Championships. And he brought our Space Marines, Adeptus Astartes, and he used the Vanguard Spearhead Detachment. And right off the bat with the characters, we see that he was playing Ultramarines. So he had Madness Calgar and the Victorous Honor Guard for 185 points. So he's a hard hitter. He has 2 durable bodyguards with him, and then that unit can still join as a leader to another squad. So very, very good. And Madness Calgar is excellent too, because he does give you 1 command point on each of your turns. And then we see the Apothecary Biologist with the Blade-Driven Deep enhancement. And if you're not familiar, the Apothecary Biologist, if his unit kills something in combat, he gains objective secured 10. So oftentimes we'll see him paired up with a full-size aggressor squad, as they can hit really hard in hand-to-hand combat. They have quite a bit of firepower. And then once you kill a single model in hand-to-hand combat, the Apothecary Biologist gets powered up for the rest of the game. And then we see Uriel Ventress. So he is often overlooked. He's pretty cheap. He's able to join a squad himself as a leader. Not particularly great in combat or anything, but can add a little extra bit of a punch. But the real reason you take Uriel Ventress is he's only 75 points, and he allows you to choose any unit in your army, not just the one that he attaches to, and that unit gains the deep strike ability. So oftentimes you'll see a big aggressor squad dropped onto the table, or sometimes Centurions as well, because it basically allows you to put what would other be a slow-moving, very durable target right in your opponent's face or on a key objective early in the game. So moving on here, we have 1,570 points worth of other data sheets. So we have the new company heroes for 95 points, a very durable unit, 4 models, all with multiple wounds, decent in combat, decent in shooting, and pretty cheap. Then we see a full aggressor squad, so he does have the Boltstorm gauntlets, which have incorporated like Power Fist in them, 220 points for them. Then we see Centurion Devastators, so a very durable unit, excellent at shooting, a full squad of them for 350 points. All with twin link las cannons and Centurion missile launchers. So a very, very shooty unit, excellent at taking out strong vehicles or Terminators, etc. And then we see 2 squads of Eradicators, 3-man units with a multi-melta in each, 95 points for those. Obviously excel at taking out heavily armored targets up close. All right, and then we see a very common staple of many Space Marine lists right now. We see the Inceptor blocks. So we have 2 Inceptor blocks of 6 models each with the Exterminators. So they basically have plasma. If you're not familiar with Inceptors, they are the newer Primaris kind of jumpy boys. They can deep strike, but the beauty of them is they don't have to be 9 inches away. They can have to deep strike outside 3 inches of any target. But in order to do so, they cannot charge that turn. But obviously they do not have any combat, so they are almost exclusively shooting. And because they can drop within the 9 inches, as long as they stay outside 3, it's very difficult to screen them out. So 2 units of those with plasma for 220 points. Very, very good at scoring objectives. And then 1 unit with the Assault Bolters, only 3 in that squad for 110 points. And then after that, it's 3 Scout Squads for 55 points apiece. Very cheap, very tactical. You can put them where you need to be, and they don't cost much. And then of course we have the Killabos assassin as well. Very tactical once again, 90 points for her. And once per game, she has the ability, when you use a stratagem, to make that stratagem cost 1 extra command point for the rest of the game. Of course, that is limited, but we see a very strong list. He goes in pretty hard on the Ingressors and the Centurion Devastators. He goes in pretty hard on the Inceptors. And then after that, we see like light, small squads. So this is a very skewed list, but it's very fast. It can be where it needs to be, and pretty good at adapting to what's happening on the fly. Obviously a strong list, as it did get second place, and out of the 3 games, it did beat Manny once. Alright, and Manny took the fixed objectives, deploy, teleport, homers, and cleanse. So he didn't have to be quite as tactical or flexible, but he does give up a couple points choosing fixed. So he did end up winning 2 out of the 3 games, and we see obviously he took the Chaos Space Marines, Slaves to Darkness detachment. So right off the bat, we have our characters, 390 points, and we'll see very clearly he opted to go with the redundancy route, something I personally like myself. So he chose a Chaos Lord, Mark Undivided, with a Demon Hammer and Plasma Pistol for 75 points, and he took that 3 times. He then took a Dark Commune with the Mark of Nurgle, and that was his Warlord for 55 points, and then he took 2 Dark Communes with the Mark Undivided. So again, redundancy with the Chaos Lords 3 times, redundancy with the Dark Commune 3 times, and then moving on to battle line, he took redundancy with the Legionaries 3 times as well. So he took 3 units of Legionaries, 5 models per, with the Mark of Slaanesh for 90 points each. And then we see for the dedicated transports, again, 225 points. He chose Chaos Rhino, Mark of Nurgle 3 times for 75 points each. So far, we have 3 Chaos Lords, 3 Dark Communes, 3 Legionaries, 3 Chaos Rhinos. So what do you think is next from the other detachments? You guessed it, 3 Accursed Cultist units as well, 2 Undivided and 1 Nurgle, 190 points per unit. And obviously there's all kinds of cool janky tricks with this list. But the redundancy doesn't end there. He then chose 3 units of Chosen, 5 models each for 110 points. And then finally, he's going to round out the list with 1 Forge Fiend, Mark of Chaos Undivided, with Ectoplasma Cannons for 180 points, and then an allied unit of 3 Nurgling Swarms for 35 points. And that gives him a nice round 2,000 points. So he's got his 3 Rhinos right off the bat, goes ahead and packs those with units, pushes them forward, gets where he needs to be. And then at that point in time, he's basically got a lot of models on the board, lots of reliable units, lots of redundancy, and just sort of grinds you apart. Still has some flexibility with the Nurglings. We do see the only vehicles in the 2 lists combined, in the sense of the 3 Rhinos, which are obviously just troop transports, and then the Forge Fiend, which has some decent staying power and also decent output. And obviously when it was all said and done, all things considered, Manny made the right decision, as he did win the whole thing. Congratulations to both these players, as they are very well known and excellent. 2 awesome lists, 3 awesome games, and we do have our official first world champion. Very, very cool. Now a quick message from today's sponsor. CMO Games has been selling Games Workshop products online for over 20 years. They carry the full line of Games Workshop products, including Warhammer 40,000, Age of Sigmar, Necromunda, Blood Bowl, paint tools, and more. Almost all Games Workshop products are priced at 15% off MSRP. CMO Games takes pre-orders for most Games Workshop products released at their earliest date possible. 12:01 a.m. on Saturday, they go live. Most of these pre-order products are also priced at 15% off MSRP. CMO Games offer free shipping in the US 48 with an order of $50 or more. Their customer service is top-notch, and they ship most orders within 24 hours. Visit CMOGames.com using the affiliate link in the description and let them know that you heard about CMO Games from Warhammer Man. Now, back to the video. This conversation goes far beyond the World Championships, however. It also touches on win rates for competitive scene as a whole. In the last 60 days, the team has analyzed data from the top 200,000 games featuring 36,000 players, and the balance auguries are good on a table bookended by the Eldari. At the top with a win rate of 57% are the Craft Worlds, who remain powerful after targeted changes in the previous balance status slate, but not aggressively so. Their malevolent Drukhari cousins sit on 44, lower than the studio wants, but not by much. Stu and the studio aim to nudge these factions in the next points review and balance status slate, then the plan is to focus on internal balance. While most factions are in the Goldilocks zone for win rates, some only have 1 or 2 reliable, viable lists or playstyles. They plan changes that will expand data sheet diversity in the competitive scene, even as new codexes bring new detachments that support new ways to play. There's loads more depth in the video, so make sure to give it a watch. Next week, we'll hear from the Warhammer Age of Sigmar team about their own World Championship conclusions. Alright, so just taking a look at the actual factions, win rate, all that good stuff here. 200,000 games, pretty nice sample size, 36,000 players, gotta give it to them on that. And here we are, Eldari sitting at 57%, so just outside that 55 acceptable zone. Probably going to see some more tweaks and some more tone downs, as one thing Eldari really has going for it is lots of really strong units in the codex. So as they sort of knock down some of the better units, there's lots of other units that can step up to take their place, which means that when they're doing the targeted nerfs, in my opinion, they went a little light-handed initially, but as they continue to tone down some of the units, and like they said, working on that internal balance should bring the Eldari down within the acceptable range. We then see Leagues of Votann up at the top with 55%. So they saw massive changes going into 10th edition, as basically all of the points costs for the entire army were rolled back to what they initially were when they launched in 9th edition. So their army rule has taken quite a hit, but their points have been basically reverted back to the original points, and now you just get way more units like you were intended to. And even though the Votann don't have a ton of choices in the actual codex, so they're fairly limited on unit options with only one transport, one tank, and pretty much one of a lot of the different things. They're obviously doing well with it with 55% win rate. Next we see Black Templars, one of the stronger Space Marine lists. They have some nice diversity within their army rule. They have the addition of extra multi-meltas on their vehicles. But I think the strongest thing for me is the Feel No Pain 6+ that you have the option of on all your units. And then we see Chaos Space Marines at 54%. Obviously we see Manny taking home the gold there, with some very popular units in the sense of the Dark Commune and the Accursed Cultists and all that good stuff. And then we see Orcs have dropped down to 53%, still very strong, taking advantage of a lot of the diversity within the list. Lots of fun and cool units, but obviously not there just for show. And next we have Chaos Knights at 52%. We still see that typical Chaos Knight list with your 15 armigers doing very well. And unlike with the Imperial Knights, you're taking all armigers the majority of the time. So the changes to the towering keyword did not affect your list nearly as much or really at all. And then we have World Eaters doing quite well at 51%. Seen a couple of nice lists there. Angron's been hitting the table quite a bit, but the 8-bound and Exalted 8-bound are doing the majority of the heavy lifting. Next we see Tau Empire up near the top at 50%. They have overall nice playstyle, some awesome tactics, and in the hands of a strong player, obviously are doing quite well. And Death Guard doing quite well at 50% after the recent changes. Genestealer Cults, again, rounded out right around that 50% mark. Space Wolves doing quite well with that 49%. And the only other of the Loyalists that are above the generic Adeptus Astartes. And then we see the Thousand Suns at 49%, again doing quite well. Magnus very strong. And then we see the Adeptus Astartes at 48%, which is right where your poster boys should be. Also, we have Adeptus Sororitas at 40%, doing very nicely right around the middle. We see the Tyranids also at 48%. And I think this is great. This is a perfect example of how all the talks about new players and starter set armies bringing down the win rate of the factions because anybody just picks them up and goes and plays in the tournaments. It's pretty obvious that anyone who is brand new to a game is not going and playing in competitive tournaments. Most people are playing quite a bit and getting a lot of experience and games under their belt before they're rolling up to the tournaments. And when they do, they're taking a nice army. They're not just busting open a couple Leviathan boxes and taking Space Marines or Tyranids and then going and competing competitively. Or are they? Wink, wink. All right, and then getting towards the bottom of the list, but still in the acceptable range, we have Chaos Demons at 48%. We're seeing a lot of them allied, specifically like Nurglings and some of the other Tzeentch demon units, because they're just cheap options to take with your Chaos armies. And then we see Dark Angels again at 48%, still very strong. Necrons at 48%. Looking forward to see how the Codex kind of buffs them up as well. And then Adeptus Mechanicus have moved up to 48%. Again, Codex right around the corner. So we know both those factions are going to have new detachments, one or more new units. And I suspect that the next time we revisit this, both of them will have moved up substantially. All right, and then we have Blood Angels at 47%. Not bad. Some people have been making them work, but overall still a nice faction. Quite a bit of their Blood Angel specific units are still a little overpriced in my opinion, or just under punchy, but not bad. And then of course we have Grey Knights at 47%. And in the right hands, the Grey Knights can be extremely powerful. And then getting towards the bottom of the list, we have the Imperial Knights. Again, they suffered heavily from the changes to the towering keyword. Not saying those changes shouldn't have been made, but we see they went from basically the top to very close to the bottom. And then we have Astra Militarum at 46%. This doesn't really surprise me here. They're kind of a one-trick pony. They're definitely good. They're definitely fun, but they do tend to underperform early in the edition, and then when they get their codex, tend to be a little stronger towards the end of the edition. And then rounding out the bottom three, we see Deathwatch at 46%. They obviously took some pretty serious nerfs, not just what the Space Marines got, but nerfs of their own as well, and that really pushed them from near the top to all the way at the bottom. I definitely think they went a little heavy-handed on Deathwatch, but also I'm a Deathwatch player, so I might be biased. And then again, we see the Adeptus Custodes very strong early in the edition, and after the changes made to a couple of the rules, all the way down at the bottom at 45%. And part of that is that they were relying on their protection or defense against mortal wounds. And the changes to devastating wounds made it so they're not technically mortal wounds anymore. So the Custodes kind of gave up some of that defense amongst other changes. And then finally, the Drukhari all the way at the bottom with 44%, just outside the acceptable range though. So still playing well, just not quite as well as the other factions. So I think overall, just kind of looking at the list here and wrapping up, Games Workshop has done a pretty good job balancing 10th edition. We have been playing quite a bit ourselves and really enjoying it. The rules are very well flushed out. There's definitely a couple things that need like addressing or tweaking. But overall, just looking at this, I think this really accurately represents just how balanced the game is right now. Now, sure, there's certain units in certain armies that are still terrible. There's other units in other armies that just have a plethora of different choices. And I definitely don't think anybody can just pick up any army with no practice and win half their games. But a lot of times, in my opinion, the problem that people have when they're trying to keep up with the meta and everything, or meta chase as we like to call it, instead of practicing, spending a bunch of time changing around their lists or copying some lists that they saw win a tournament or on the internet, so they never quite master their faction or their units. Instead, they're just sort of always chasing the ball that they can never catch. So let me know what you guys think. Obviously, this is pretty good. Only 2 factions falling outside the acceptable range. Eldari only 2 points out on top, and Drukhari only 1 point out on the bottom. And everybody else kind of right in the middle of that sandwich. So this is pretty much it. Going to round out the year, and then we should have some points changes coming in January. Little tweaks here and there, and they specifically said they'll be addressing some of the internal balance, which is nice because you don't want certain units to be auto-include while other units are basically untakeable. So let me know what you think down below. Are you having similar results to what we see here? Do you feel like your faction is extremely good and needs nerfed, or extremely bad and needs buffed? Always like to hear back from you guys in the comments. And of course, special thanks to CMO Games for sponsoring the video. Check out the link in the description to save 15%. That's it for today. Warhammer Man Studios, I'm Warhammer Man, and happy Thanksgiving to my friends out there who celebrate. And I'm out of here.